vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jackie, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, February 8th edition of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Remaking America. When President Trump vowed a tide of change in his inaugural address last year, he was not exaggerating. 1 year in, those changes are everywhere, often turbulent and polarizing, manifestations of the sharp right turn that Mr. Trump promised for the country and the world. The president has declared that his power is constrained only by his own morality. That sentiment has made itself felt in the aggressive immigration enforcement in Minneapolis and other cities, which has led to deaths. The New York Times found evidence of change, welcome and not, in all 50 states and in Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. The list is not complete by any means. Then again, Mr. Trump says that he is far from finished. From California back to Mexico, but on their own terms. A long goodbye after 30 years in the U.S. By Orlando Mayorkin. Bloomington, California. Enrique Castillos and his wife stopped at a Winchell's Donut House. It was part of their after-church routine on Friday nights. That evening's sermon had been about finding peace in God in turbulent times, and they felt it spoke directly to them. Enrique, 63, and his wife, Maria Elena Hernandez, 55, were undocumented immigrants. Like millions of others in Southern California, they had been looking over their shoulders as federal agents conducted immigration sweeps. Freedom, they felt, had become impossible in the land of the free. They had made a decision: leave America and move back to Mexico. The process has the sterile, bureaucratic name of self-deportation. For Enrique and Maria Elena, it resembled a long, slow-motion goodbye. It took an emotional, spiritual, and logistical toll on everyone around them, including their 3 children and 2 grandchildren. They had to decide what to do with their old, beloved dog and their trucking business. They had to suddenly cut ties with their church and their neighbors. Visitors bearing gifts dropped by unannounced. Maria Elena had suggested to Enrique that he leave for Mexico first, while she waited for her broken foot to heal. No, she recalled Enrique telling her, "Together we came and together we go." Their decision to go came long before the Trump administration's crackdown in Minneapolis, and long before federal operations intensified in their own San Bernardino County neighborhood. Returning to Mexico had always been in the cards, but they had wanted to go on their own terms, retiring there someday. The Trump administration's crackdown had prompted them to make that someday now. The couple's departure hit the family hard. They watch the news now with conflicting emotions as Enrique and Maria Elena start their lives over in Mexico, and their adult children struggle to carry on without them. None of the couple's friends or relatives tried to change their minds, and there were few heated debates over the decision. In their community, the federal immigration raids made such an extreme move seem entirely reasonable. It's a mixture of all those feelings, being grateful for knowing that they're safe, and at the same time hating that this is the way it has to be, said Lizbeth Castillos, 29, the couple's oldest daughter. Back at the coffee shop, Maria Elena and Enrique could feel the clock tick. It was August 8th. They had just 2 weeks left. Their nearly 30 years in the United States were coming to an end. Ya casi, Enrique told her. Almost time. Maria Elena set down her coffee cup. Ya casi, she repeated. Maria Elena had to squeeze her belongings into just a few suitcases. She insisted on taking a little piece of home with her, her curtains. Some were thin and delicate, others thick to dampen sound. Gold, red, green, a color for every season. They had rented the house in Bloomington, an unincorporated community some 50 miles east of Los Angeles, for more than 10 years. It was semi-rural, with dirt sidewalks and residents on horseback. Outside, Enrique kept chickens in the backyard. Inside, Maria Elena had her curtains. To make room in the luggage for them, Maria Elena took out all the socks. Her younger daughter, Helen, 23, a school teacher, told her not to worry because they could get new things in Mexico. Eventually, Maria Elena gave up. Leaving America meant leaving her curtains, too. It was lunchtime. Maria Elena and Enrique had just sat down at the kitchen table, plates of bistec, white rice, black beans, and diced cactus spread out before them. There was a sudden pounding at the door. For a moment, the conversation grew quiet. For months, masked immigration agents had seemed to appear everywhere in Southern California, and fear gripped entire communities. Except for doctor's appointments for her broken foot and strategically timed trips to the market, Maria Elena had stopped leaving the house. One day, Enrique had called his daughter Lizbeth, who works for a local immigrant rights group. A white sedan was tailing him. He thought it might be ICE. Nothing had come of it, but it was another sign that life as they knew it in the United States was over. They were afraid of being picked up by agents, not so much because of the threat of deportation, but because of the uncertainty of detention. One goal of the Trump administration's mass deportation campaign is to effectively scare people into self-deporting while dangling financial incentives to leave. Enrique and Maria Elena had decided not to accept the administration's offer of $1,000 and a flight home to migrants who deport themselves because they did not trust the government to honor the arrangement. Ultimately, there had been no dramatic incident that spurred their departure. They had simply grown weary day after day of watching their world shrink to fit only the bounds of their home. He said he would go after criminals, and we don't consider ourselves criminals, Maria Elena said to the president, adding, "We consider ourselves working people. It turns out for him, we're all criminals." Although they were living in America illegally, the couple saw no contradiction in that. Undocumented immigrants were part of the fabric of everyday life in Southern California. Over time, it didn't seem especially risky. Still, they expressed regret that they had never obtained legal status. In 2006, Maria Elena and her children had joined protests in Los Angeles demanding amnesty for undocumented immigrants. The family had also discussed another pathway. If one of their children joined the military, Maria Elena and Enrique could get the right to stay. Each of their 3 children had seriously considered signing up when they turned 18. But the couple never wanted their children to set aside their dreams and careers for their parents. Were immigration agents now at the front door? Responding to the pounding, Enrique and Maria Elena's son, Joaquin, 26, bolted to open it. It was their close children. And they say to myself, it was their close friend Kiki dropping by to say hello. Everyone was anxious about Rex, the family's scruffy 14-year-old dog. Maria Elena and Enrique had decided to put Rex down before they left. He was ailing, could hardly walk, and was in constant pain. Rex had seen Joaquin and Helen grow from children to adults. One day, when Joaquin was away in college, he learned his parents were giving the dog to a family friend because Rex had been killing chickens in the backyard. Joaquin raced home, and he took Rex in himself. This time, Joaquin was not stepping in to save him. Everyone had agreed that Rex was suffering. Still, saying goodbye to the dog was like saying goodbye to a member of the family. Rex was a constant, as Helen put it, and those constants were ending as the family prepared for self-deportation. It needs to be done soon, Helen told her dad over dinner as they discussed when to put down Rex. But she didn't want it done this soon. Right now there's too much loss, she added. I can't do both. A nervous Enrique stood at the front of the church and clutched the microphone. He was telling the congregation, with Maria Elena standing at his side, that they were leaving for Mexico. To Enrique, it wasn't so much the president's will, but God's. He saw self-deportation as an opportunity to spread the word of God to his family back in his hometown of Mapastec, near the plot of land in rural Chiapas where they had decided to move. He found comfort in Psalms 37, which says that God does not forsake those who believe. Every Sunday, Enrique carried a composition book with notes on Scripture and a Bible with his name scrawled on the side. Maria Elena brought a tambourine for the hymns, and in the house, Enrique led prayers before meals. For Maria Elena, living the United States was a way for her to come clean with God. For years, the couple said, Enrique had been using another person's identity, a common but illegal way for undocumented immigrants to get the paperwork they need to work in the country. They said that not long after arriving in the United States, a friend had helped Enrique use the identity of a Honduran who had work authorization. Last year, the Trump administration moved to end that type of work authorization, making it harder for Enrique to keep using that identity. Guilt weighed on Maria Elena. We got tired of living in a lie, she said, adding, we have to be good before God. You can't be a child of God and lie with two names. She already had a name for the plot of farmland awaiting them in their native Chiapas. Rancho La Promesa de Dios, God's Promise Ranch. At the church, a long line formed before them. For half an hour, one by one, congregants gave them tearful hugs. Michael, too, bounced around the living room, his brightly colored toys scattered all over the tiled floor. Olivia, 4, was fixated on a cartoon on the television. Maria Elena was on grandmother duty. Grandma and Grandpa's house was where the little ones learned Spanish and where Enrique cut up fruit to feed them one piece at a time. It was days like these that the grandparents cherished. It was days like these that made Maria Elena cry. It's only when I look at my grandchildren and I say to myself, who is going to take care of them? Enrique grabbed his belongings from the old turquoise Toyota. His longtime friend who had dropped by to say hello that one day, Kike, was there to pick it up. For Enrique, it meant the old clunker was one less thing he had to get rid of. Kike and Enrique had much in common, including their names. Kike is short for Enrique. The two men are from the same town in Mexico, and they ended up here in the same place in America. Kike was sad to see them go, but he, too, was contemplating leaving because of the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. A lot of fellow paisans are wanting to leave, he said. It doesn't look like this thing is going to get resolved. It's going from bad to worse. Each sibling took turns on the mic. It was Enrique and Maria Elena's farewell party at a nearby property. Earlier that day, the family had said goodbye to Rex before putting him down. At the party, a mariachi belted out Christian ballads. Butterflies, a symbol of migration, decorated a towering fruit spread. Joaquin said he would miss the little things, like stopping by on his lunch break for his mom's beans. Helen, the youngest, talked about how there was always Mom and Dad. When her older siblings had moved out, she had remained. Now, for the first time, the unit of 3, Helen, Maria Elena, and Enrique, would be apart. Lisbeth tried to focus on the positive. She said this was a fresh chapter. Their parents' legacy in America would live on. 3 college-educated children with dignified careers, and 2 grandchildren, one old enough to express her wish to spend every summer in Chiapas. On the party invitation cards Lisbeth had sent out weeks earlier, there was nothing that suggested the gravity of self-deportation. The occasion was simply titled New Beginnings. It was August 24th. 16 days had passed since that stop at the donut shop after church. At the house in Bloomington, after instant coffee and pan dulce, the family huddled in the living room and bowed their heads. This was the day Maria Elena and Enrique were self-deporting. This morning, our Father, we're grateful to you because you have kept us here in this land, in this country for 29 years, Enrique said, and we thank you because you never abandoned us. Then they squeezed into the van and set course for the 2-hour trip to the border crossing in San Diego. In the blink of an eye, as they crossed into Mexico, 29 years reset to 0. This was the couple's first time returning to Mexico together. It was their home country, but a sense of wonder seemed to overtake Maria Elena and Enrique. They had entered the United States nearly 3 decades ago, crossing that same border on foot. They had initially intended to stay for a few years, save up money, and return to Mexico, but after they had children, their plans changed. Saliendo del sueño americano y ahora entramos al sueño mexicano, Maria Elena told her family in the van, leaving the American dream and now entering the Mexican dream. A bright day greeted them in Tijuana as they strolled downtown. Maria Elena ambled around on a scooter for her broken foot, feeling out of place. Joaquin put his arms around her, trying to cheer her up. They planned to stay at a relative's house until their flight to Chiapas. In the months to come, Maria Elena and Enrique would try to adjust to life in Mexico. They would stay with relatives and make slow progress fixing up a small dwelling on their plot of land. They would find themselves at times overwhelmed and homesick. But before all of that, on this first bright day in Tijuana, Enrique pulled out his Mexican ID and smiled. It might have felt like any other family trip. The political forces and fears that had forced them to leave went unspoken. After the siblings had dropped off their parents in Mexico and headed back home in the van, they felt a sense of optimism as they waited in the long line at the port of entry. Vendors selling churros, chips, and religious ornaments paced between cars. Joaquin lamented that there was no time for a final Dodgers game with his dad or a family trip to the beach. Lisbeth assured him there would be plenty of memories for them to make in Chiapas. Helen, the school teacher, was anxious to get home and prepare her lesson plan for the week. She read aloud a list her mom had given her. It had all of the things she had forgotten to pack but wanted from home the next time she saw them. Number 1, Helen read aloud in the van, "Look for my earrings." Hours had passed when a customs agent finally waved them into the United States. Soon, everyone except the driver slipped into a slumber, and the road home was quiet. They slowly woke up as the car rolled up to the house in Bloomington. Olivia, 4, realized she was at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Then it dawned on her. Grandma and Grandpa were not there. She cried out for them. The siblings embraced in the middle of the driveway. Their parents had once described what it felt like to leave life behind in America. They said it felt like a kind of death. Lisbeth, surrounded that night with her loved ones on the driveway of her parents' empty house, felt the same way too. She called it grief. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. They're not alone in copying Thoreau's Cabin in the Woods by Dory Shevlin. Jasper and Satchel Senowitz can't believe it was a one-man job. As children, their father read to them from Henry David Thoreau's Walden, which includes lengthy descriptions of Thoreau building his cabin at the eponymous pond in Concord, Mass., using hand tools to form beams from fallen timber and upcycling wood from a railroad worker's shanty. All of it he did alone, except for raising the frame with a few friends, though even this Thoreau qualifies as rather to improve so good an occasion for neighborliness than from any necessity. After building a full-scale replica of Thoreau's cabin in the woods behind their family's vacation home in Maine, the brothers don't buy it. Even using a sawmill and power tools, it took them 3 summers of labor on and off between school and work, beginning the first summer of the pandemic, plus the help of their father, Tom Senowitz. Thoreau was living in his cabin in under 3 months. There's no way that he did it by himself in the time period that he said it was done, said Jasper, now 23. No registry tallies how many people have made replicas of Thoreau's cabin, but they exist across the country, built for private use, for writers' retreats, for academic purposes, and as Airbnb rentals. To aid the projects, the Thoreau Society started selling blueprints of the 10 by 15-foot cabin at its gift shop about 7 years ago. And at the Sam Buford Woodworking Institute in Adrian, Michigan, you can sign up for a 4-week Walden Cabin series, which teaches all of the skills necessary to make your own cabin. The course teaches you in using only the tools and technologies of the time. Axecraft gets a week of its own. In 1845, Thoreau moved into his one-room cabin in the woods and proceeded to live there for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days in significant, though not total, quietude, seeking, as he wrote, to front only the essential facts of life. He published his account of this experience, Walden, or Life in the Woods, in 1854. Today it seems quaint to imagine a man so overwhelmed by 19th century society that he'd seek such extended retreat. Back then, there were no electricity, no cell phones, no nudifying AI chat box. But Thoreau's prescription for a life lived more simply, one more attuned to nature, is an enticing response to this unmatched moment of political, social, and technological chaos. It's likely why his legacy has survived so long, perhaps why he's far more popular a writer today than he ever was in his own life. The first print run of 2,000 copies of Walden took more than 5 years to sell. It has since been translated into nearly every language spoken on Earth. Perhaps it is also why people are building his cabin. The Senkowitz brothers originally hoped to build a treehouse, but the elder Mr. Senkowitz, an architect, prohibited them from damaging or removing any living trees on the property, prompting a pivot. I somehow convinced them that building Henry David Thoreau's cabin was their idea, he said. The boys had visited the site in Concord with their father years prior, but admittedly the interest in transcendentalism was mostly his, especially insofar as the philosophy emphasizes individualism, self-reliance, and a connection to nature. Still, they were game to build the cabin with his blessing, using mostly recycled materials and milling their own wood from fallen trees they found in the forest. Give a couple of teenagers a commercial chainsaw, what could happen? Tom Senkowitz joked. The boys picked up the new skills they needed by watching YouTube videos. The rest they'd learned as children in woodworking classes. Not everyone who builds a replica Walden cabin takes as long as the Senkowitz family, because not everyone takes as strict an environmental approach. But like them, most have made it a group effort. Jim and Rachel Van Eerden had a barn raising for their cabin in Stokesdale, North Carolina, with friends building historically accurate furniture, a contractor working on the frame, and even a blacksmith forging nails in the style of the 1850s. Their Walden cabin is the first in a growing series of literature-inspired structures on their homestead property, rented out via Airbnb and VRBO. The listing explicitly warns would-be visitors about the lack of plumbing, electricity, and Wi-Fi. Showers and toilets are available at nearby Narnia Cottage instead. Their cabin's interior is nearly true to Thoreau's model, with even the dents and nicks in the wood desk matching the writer's own. They made a few additions to the structure, though. We gave ourselves what we called the third-year liberty, where we said, okay, if Thoreau would have stayed a third year, he would have wanted a little front porch. He would have wanted a garret, said Mr. Van Eerden. Jeffrey Ryan had originally planned to build his cabin solo to mimic Thoreau, but he pivoted after nearly falling from an 8-foot ladder. That's when I said, "Time out, I'm calling for help," Mr. Ryan said. He completed the work on his cabin with the help of a childhood friend, building it in the woods behind his house in Maine. In line with Thoreau's environmental ethos, he sourced used and recycled materials wherever possible. Many of the wood beams were leftovers from the construction of his main house. The wood stove was a gift from a neighbor, and the antique windows were purchased on Facebook Marketplace. "I've stayed remarkably true to his vision," he said. He also stayed close to Thoreau's cost. Mr. Ryan spent $1,670 on supplies. Thoreau spent $28.12, about $1,200 in today's dollars. But for others, using Thoreau's exact methods is besides the point. Kevin Klein built his cabin in the woods behind his house in Hingham, Mass. 2 years ago, tapping his stepfather, a master carpenter, to help. He paid a contractor to put on the roof and spent roughly $4,500 on materials from Lowe's. This isn't a strict historical fetishization project, he said. Mr. Klein first became acquainted with Thoreau when he was in high school watching South Park. In a Season 1 episode, Cartman wins a writing contest by plagiarizing Walden, and Mr. Klein, curious and unfamiliar, bought a copy. It still lives on his bookshelf, and he's read it multiple times. Simplify, simplify. Even before Walden, critics questioned Thoreau's motivations for building and moving into his isolated cabin. "I think he touches a lot of nerves," said Laura Walls, a scholar of American transcendentalism. "What a lazy bum this guy has to be, not pulling his weight in a society and isolating himself like that," she said, paraphrasing his detractors. But for fans of Thoreau, that individualism is the appeal. The whole idea of leaving society behind and rebelling against industrialization and being self-reliant with hand tools, said Luke Barnett, whose Sam Buford Woodworking Institute offers the Walden Cabin series. Mr. Barnett was first introduced to Thoreau in 5th grade, bribed with Snickers bars as part of a reading program. "I loved it," he said. "It's kind of dry, let's not lie and pretend it's not. But the concepts in it attracted me, and I reread it every few years." As a child, Mr. Barnett experienced periods of homelessness and came into his woodworking career after dropping out of high school. Though most of his work involves power tools, Mr. Barnett still sees the value in doing things by hand and offers his class to help empower like-minded woodworkers and outdoors people. With just those tools, they can build anything they could ever imagine. They do not even need electricity, he said. Nobody can ever take that away from you. You are completely self-reliant. In addition to championing self-reliance, Thoreau was an early environmentalist. Today's Walden Pond is lush with trees, thanks to a state reservation program, but Thoreau witnessed immense swaths of the forest torn down by loggers. He was among the first to decry the loss and among the first to question the rampant consumerism which drove its degradation. An abolitionist, Thoreau avoided sugar, which was produced by slave labor, and he wore simple clothes instead of the new Paris fashions. To be an ethical consumer of food, clothes, shelter, or even entertainment today is difficult. but a few hours alone in a simple cabin can offer some perspective. Dr. Walls explained, "The whole point for Thoreau was a deliberate experiment in simplifying our wants, what we think we want, and trying to get to the heart of what it means to live a full life." Great ocean of solitude. Self-reliance doesn't mean hermitude. It didn't for Thoreau. While living at Walden, he regularly went into town for supplies, visited with friends, and ate meals with his family. But he also sometimes needed a break. While at Walden, Thoreau read and wrote, swam in the lake, and spent hours in total stillness, raptly observing nature from his doorway. "I grew in those seasons like corn in the night," Thoreau wrote from the experience. For Mr. Ryan, his cabin offers a peaceful space just for writing. "The simplicity invites focus," he said. He has just a kerosene lamp, a desk modeled after Thoreau's, and bookshelves full of research material to avoid using Google. "It naturally makes me not want to check email impulsively. I'm there to write." Mr. Klein mostly uses his cabin as a quiet place to smoke his cigars. He, his wife, and their 4 children hike in the woods behind their home and will occasionally sleep out in the cabin using mats and blankets from the house. The Van Eerdens only sometimes get to read in their cabin. At about $130 a night, it's usually booked. We have literally had guests from Germany, from New Zealand, from Paris, from London, all arriving with excitement about stepping into a book that made a mark on them. Mr. Van Eerden said, "Sometimes the excitement exceeds experience. He's had to explain to some guests how to start a fire in the fireplace." Jasper Senowitz has read some Thoreau, but not as extensively as his father. "I'm sure it's instilled in me in ways I probably am not even really aware of," he said. His father has furnished the cabin authentically, with hard-wooden chairs and a desk. If it were up to Jasper, there'd be a couch instead. But he recognizes that his father will be enjoying more time there than he and his brother, who are busy building their careers as engineers. Satchel did spend the night there a few years back with his then-girlfriend. "I honestly would be too scared to stay there alone," he said. "Those woods are spooky." You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Russian bombardment decimates the backbone of Ukraine's power grid, by Maria Varenikova. Kyiv, Ukraine. Russia struck Ukrainian energy infrastructure on Saturday night with hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles, forcing emergency outages across Ukraine just days after peace talks concluded with few signs of progress. Every day, Russia could choose real diplomacy, but it chooses new strikes, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine said on social media. Moscow must be deprived of the ability to use the cold as leverage against the Ukraine, he added. The overnight strikes hit high-voltage transmission lines that are used to transmit electricity nationwide and that form the backbone of Ukraine's power grid, as well as power plants and substations, said Denis Shmyhal, the country's energy minister. The damage prompted Kyiv to request emergency electricity assistance from Poland, Mr. Shmyhal said on social media. The strikes were the latest in a series of Russian attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure during a winter freeze. Mr. Shmyhal said the bombardment on Saturday had forced operators at nuclear power plants to unload reactor units, meaning that workers reduced power output or shut down reactors as a precautionary measure when external electricity supplies became unstable. The next round of negotiations to end the war, which is about to enter its 5th year, are expected to take place in mid-February in Miami and will include delegations from Ukraine, Russia, and the United States, Mr. Zelensky said at a news briefing on Friday. Mr. Zelensky said the Trump administration appeared intent on securing an end to the war by June because of American domestic politics and upcoming midterm elections. They say they want everything done by June and want a clear timeline, Mr. Zelensky said. On Friday, President Trump told reporters on Air Force One that we have very good talks going with Russia and Ukraine. He made no mention of a June deadline. Peace talks, however, have made little headway. Trilateral negotiations on Thursday in the United Arab Emirates among Ukraine, Russia, and the United States produced few concrete results. The difficult issues remain difficult, Mr. Zelensky said at the news briefing, adding that Ukraine had once again reaffirmed its position on the future of the Donbas region, which Russia seeks to fully control. We stand where we stand, he said. Ukraine has rejected a unilateral withdrawal from the parts of eastern Donbas that it still controls. But it has proposed compromises, including having both armies in the area withdraw an equal distance from the current front line. Mr. Zelensky has previously said that any compromises would require security guarantees to deter another potential Russian invasion. During the talks, Mr. Zelensky said American officials again proposed turning the Donbas region into a free economic zone as part of a broader settlement. But neither Ukraine nor Russia have found the proposal acceptable. Another major stumbling point remains unresolved, Mr. Zelensky said, ownership of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is occupied by Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. Negotiators in the United Arab Emirates also began discussing the complexities of separating the two armies if a ceasefire were to be declared, Mr. Zelensky said. That is a daunting task. On Friday, Ukraine's commanding general said the front extended 750 miles, nearly the same distance between New York and Chicago, with an area within range of drone strikes that extends 12 miles in depth on both sides. In the international news, the Dutch army signs up a reservist, the Queen, by Koba Rickovaert. Queen Maxima of the Netherlands has enlisted in the Dutch army as a reservist, as countries across Europe aim to strengthen their armed forces to reduce the continent's military dependence on the United States. Maxima, 54, chose to enlist because our security can no longer be taken for granted, the Royal House of the Netherlands said in a news release on Wednesday. European nations are racing to shore up their defense capabilities. The United States has insisted that Europe shoulder more of the burden of its own defense, and countries have pledged to increase their military spending significantly. Some officials have also begun to suggest that the European Union will need a larger and more unified armed forces. The Dutch royal family's effort to emphasize service and the need for preparedness at a tense geopolitical moment is not isolated. Military training is fairly common among European royals, though they often complete it earlier in life. Princess Ingrid Alexandra of Norway recently finished 15 months of military service. Princess Elizabeth of Belgium completed a year in social and military sciences at the Royal Military Academy in Belgium in 2021, and many members of the British royal family have served. Princess Leonor of Spain enrolled in military training at the General Academy of Air and Space and last year completed her first solo military flight. Maxima is not the only Dutch royal to have recently enlisted in the army. Last month, her daughter, Princess Catharina Amalia, was promoted to corporal after finishing military training. The Queen was appointed to the rank of soldier and began training on Wednesday. Pictures released by the Royal House showed her practicing shooting a handgun, climbing a rope, and marching in formation. After completing her training, Maxima will be promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel. Reservists serve in the armed forces part-time, often alongside civilian jobs or studies, and they are deployed when and where they are needed. They are active in all branches of the military. Like many other European countries, the Netherlands has been working to expand its military in the face of a perceived threat from Russia and the desire to be more self-reliant in defense. The three political parties poised to lead the country after recent elections agree on that point. We do not accept that we remain dependent on others for our protection, they said in the government agreement for their coalition. The governing deal includes plans to increase military spending to 3.5% of gross domestic product in 2035, up 1.9% in 2024. The Netherlands also wants to expand the armed forces to at least 122,000 people from fewer than 80,000 now. To drum up interest among Dutch young people in joining the military, the country's incoming coalition government plans to require all 17-year-olds to complete a survey about working for the Army. If this does not yield sufficient results, we will consider other measures, such as the reintroduction of selective conscription, the coalition deal said. Haiti hits full crisis as council tenure expires. It's unclear what comes when oversight is over. This article is by Francis Robles, David C. Adams, and Andre Polter. Talisha Lewis, a street vendor in Pétionville, a community outside Haiti's capital, was doing laundry at home one day last year when she said she was chased out of her house by a gang. She fled to a shelter, she recounted, where her pregnant daughter gave birth to a baby on the cold cement floor. Ms. Lewis does not have tuition money for her other children to attend school. Her sales are bad, and she is the only one in her family with a job. Yet Ms. Lewis, 53, like so many other Haitians attacked by gangs or suffocated by crushing poverty, has a single wish. We need a strong government. We need nothing else, Ms. Lewis said. A strong government, even merely a functioning government, seems a tall order in what is the Western Hemisphere's most dysfunctional nation. Haiti has been without an elected president for nearly 5 years. A presidential council put in place nearly 2 years ago with help of the United States to run the country was supposed to organize new elections and bring stability to a nation whose history has been marred by long stretches of misrule and violence. And while Haiti was mired in crisis before and during the council's oversight, running the country could become even more challenging when its tenure expires on Saturday. The United States, for its part, is eager to say goodbye to the country after accusing members of poor governance and using their positions to enrich themselves. The country does have a prime minister appointed by the Council. The United States and the United Nations are pushing him to stay on. But while the United States has spent millions of dollars strengthening an international security force in an effort to bring peace to Haiti, it's not clear when the country will be safe enough to allow Haitians to elect their next president. Elections are tentatively planned for August, but few experts believe they can take place. Haiti has not held elections since 2016, and its last president, Jovenel Moise, was assassinated in 2021. The country also has no sitting parliament. The leadership crisis has only deepened in recent weeks. 4 members of the Presidential Council tried to fire the Prime Minister, Alex Fils-Aimé, claiming he had not done enough to fight gangs. The Prime Minister did not respond to requests for comment. The Trump administration has responded by revoking their visas to enter the United States and said in a statement that it would target corrupt actors seeking to interfere in Haiti's path to elected governance for their own gains. But the council members who were punished said the Trump administration's response was another instance of the United States interfering in Haiti's international affairs. Many leaders in Haiti have been pressured, manipulated, even punished when they attempt to pursue an independent national agenda, said Fritz Alphonse Jean, a council member whose visa was yanked. There is like a recurring pattern where foreign powers treat Haitian officials as expendable tools. After Moise's assassination, a different prime minister, Ariel Henry, ruled the nation for nearly 3 years until early 2024, when gangs formed a coalition to topple his government and wreak havoc on the capital, Port-au-Prince. The city and its surrounding communities have suffered an explosion of violence ever since. According to the United Nations, more than 16,000 people have been killed in Haiti because of gang-related violence since 2022. More than 1 million people have been forced from their homes in recent years and are living with relatives or in public buildings. Malia Noel, 45, said she had been sleeping in a public square in Port-au-Prince since November. She'd been living with a cousin, but violence forced her out, she said, and gang roadblocks prevented her from returning to her hometown, Jepmel, in southern Haiti. I think the fact that the country doesn't have a president contributes to our decline, she said. It's why things are so bad. Some modest progress has been made to repel gangs. Private military contractors working with a multinational police force have begun attacking gang strongholds, said a U.S. official who spoke on the condition his name not be published in order to discuss sensitive diplomatic and security matters. The Haitian police and the multinational force, made up largely of Kenyan police officers who arrived in late June of 2024, have cleared some areas of the gangs, but have struggled to keep the groups from retaking them. The multinational force is expected to increase to 5,500 in the coming months. More than a dozen countries have offered troops who should deploy this spring, the official said. After Mr. Henry's ouster, the United States and a multinational body that represents Caribbean nations formed the 9-member Transitional Presidential Council. But the council, known as TPC, has been hampered by accusations of corruption and political feuds. The Justice Ministry's anti-corruption unit accused 3 members of soliciting bribes, but they refused to resign. Then came the dispute over Mr. Fils Aimé, the current prime minister, and efforts to dismiss him over what some members said was his inability to combat armed groups. But U.S. officials were concerned that firing Mr. Fils Aimé would lead to chaos and said they believed that the council members were really trying to extract government positions once their terms expired. Mr. Jean released publicly text messages he said he had received from Henry Wooster, the top U.S. diplomat in Haiti, after he and other council members proposed firing the prime minister. Mr. Wooster suggested to Mr. Jean that if he persisted in trying to fire the prime minister, he might bar Mr. Jean and his family from traveling to the United States, the messages showed. Within days, Mr. Jean said he received a call from the U.S. Embassy letting him know he could no longer travel to the United States. Leslie Voltaire, another presidential council member, also proposed firing the prime minister and said he, too, had received a blistering rebuke from Mr. Wooster. The State Department did not deny the politician's account. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called Mr. Fils Aimé to tell him he had the Trump administration's support. Secretary Rubio emphasized the importance of his continued tenure as Haiti's prime minister to combat terrorist gangs and stabilize the island, Tommy Pigott, a State Department spokesman, said in a statement. Mr. Voltaire and Mr. Jean strongly rejected any suggestion that they had ties to gangs or were corrupt. Robert Fanton, Jr., a Haiti-born political scientist at the University of Virginia, said the country had never had a power vacuum this severe. If Mr. Fils Aimé continues to serve in his post only because the Trump administration insisted on it, his legitimacy would be questioned, he said. Under normal circumstances in Haiti, an elected president chooses a prime minister from among the members of the majority party of the parliament. The person is then ratified by Parliament. We've had moments where we didn't have a president, but there were other institutions that were there to fill the vacuum, Mr. Fathom said. We are in full crisis. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As a Super Bowl host, Santa Clara is feeling pushed to the sidelines. By Soumya Kalamanlia, Santa Clara, California. The hanging lanterns of a historic Chinatown, the Golden Gate Bridge, Victorian homes famous for their sherbet hues. The fan entrance to Levi's Stadium, which did host the Super Bowl on Sunday, has for days been plastered with these familiar images of a city 45 miles away. The stadium is actually in Santa Clara, a mostly landlocked suburb of 133,000 people, best known as the home of major tech companies including NVIDIA and Intel. But much of the marketing and fan events for the big game were celebrated in San Francisco, the picturesque anchor of the Bay Area that draws outsized political attention and the bulk of the region's tourists. Santa Clara residents seem largely accustomed to being the forgotten little sibling, regularly overshadowed not just by San Francisco, but also by neighboring San Jose, the most populous city in Northern California, and by the broader Silicon Valley. After all, the team that plays in Levi's Stadium is known as the San Francisco 49ers. You hear about all these events going on in San Francisco, in San Jose, every place but Santa Clara, where they're going to play the game, said Gary Morharita, 78, who lives across the street from the stadium. Santa Clara is one of the oldest cities in California. Founded in 1777 with a Spanish mission that was built just a year after the one in San Francisco. The city is also home to Santa Clara University, established in 1851, one of the oldest colleges on the West Coast, and the alma mater of Governor Gavin Newsom. It was long known for its bounty of prunes, apricots, and other fruit through the middle of the 20th century, when the Santa Clara Valley was known as the Valley of Heart's Delight. And it was once appealing for being more affordable than the rest of the Bay Area. But then the region transformed into Silicon Valley, drawing increasingly wealthy workers who wanted short commutes to the nearby campuses of tech companies, including Intel, Google, and Apple. Today, it is a city of gray office buildings and well-maintained parks planted with redwoods. Surrounded by San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Cupertino, it's a place where small one-story homes now sell for over $1 million. Santa Clara never really built its identity in being interesting to outsiders, said Bob Stadler, a local business consultant. It's always been kind of quietly behind the scenes, a great place to live, really well run. Despite the love showered on San Francisco, locals still feel pride that their city hosted the nation's biggest sporting event for the second time. The Super Bowl first came to Santa Clara in 2016, 2 years after Levi's Stadium was built there to be the home of the San Francisco 49ers. John Park, a family medicine doctor who lives in Santa Clara and grew up in the Boston area, wore a Patriots jersey as he worked on a laptop this week at a Starbucks surrounded by tech workers taking virtual meetings. Mr. Park, 36, said he had worked extra shifts to buy a ticket to the Super Bowl game, which was a 40-minute walk from his house. He said that beats sitting in traffic and a parking lot. It kind of feels surreal, Mr. Park said. It's really a dream come true. Glenn Polini, 65, used to hunt doves and pheasants where Levi Stadium now stands. Mr. Polini, a retired contractor who has lived in Santa Clara his entire life, said the home he bought decades ago for $300,000 is now worth more than $2 million. The The 49ers, everything is expensive here, and thanks to Silicon Valley, that's the way it is, he said. Today we'd never be able to buy our house. The 49ers had played in San Francisco for most of the team's existence, dating to the early days of Kezar Stadium in Golden Gate Park before the team moved into Candlestick Park along the bay. But Candlestick, with its swirling winds and aging structure that lacked modern luxury suites, was deemed unfit for a team playing in the NFL. The 49ers had wanted a new stadium for years, but failed to reach an agreement to build what they wanted in San Francisco. The organization instead struck a deal with the city of Santa Clara, where it already had its headquarters and practice facilities. Though the team has been playing in Santa Clara since 2014, national broadcasts routinely show footage of the Bay Bridge, Alcatraz Island, or tourists riding cable cars in San Francisco to give viewers a sense of place. Even the San Jose-based TV station shows images of San Francisco, Mr. Stadler said. Even if that place is at least an hour drive from the stadium. I know you've got decades of B-roll of Lombard Street showing the Ferry Building and the views at sunset, said Mr. Stadler, who has lobbied TV stations to show more images of the South Bay. It's stunning, but it's just like, come on. It isn't just about the marketing. While the New England Patriots and Seattle Seahawks practiced in Santa Clara, the NFL made San Francisco the center of its festivities. Many fans, media, and celebrities are staying at hotels there and plan to wait until game day to trek to Santa Clara. It was the same in 2016. A study commissioned by the Super Bowl 50 host committee found that the game had a $240 million economic impact on the Bay Area, with more than 57% of the revenues benefiting San Francisco. San Jose saw 12.3% of the economic pie. Santa Clara got a mere 7.2%. The rest went to Oakland and areas around the Bay Area. Sudhanshu Jain, a city councilman in Santa Clara, known as Suds, said he believed there were primarily two reasons for the lack of Super Bowl festivities in Santa Clara. The 49ers now have a strained relationship with the city over their stadium contract, including years of court battles. And the city council decided not to have any of its own events because its police force was already overwhelmed trying to provide security for the game and all of the people who are staying in hotels, he said. Mr. Jain, a tech worker who has lived in the city for 27 years, opposed the stadium's construction because he worried about how a small city could manage such a large venue. Some people think everyone in the world should know Santa Clara's name, he said. I'm not of that persuasion. I don't see that we have to be that well known. On a recent morning, Evelyn Birch, 43, wore a 49ers shirt when she stopped to pick up donuts for a Super Bowl potluck at her office where she works as an executive assistant. Though she grew up in the South Bay, she had to move 2 years ago to Gilroy, California, nearly 40 miles south, because the cost of living was far too high, she said. She felt proud that the Super Bowl was coming to the town she missed so much. She had only one grievance. I just wish the Niners were coming, she said. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, February 8th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Jackie. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times opinion page. Following that at 3 o'clock, the New York Times Arts and Leisure, and at 4 o'clock, a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. 5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print